the non-diet approach to Crohn's nutrition. Is this even possible? Is it possible to help your Crohn's disease without following one of these super strict, restrictive, hard to follow, complicated IBD diets? And the short answer is yes, it really is possible. So how does this work, right? All of the diets are designed with some sort of science backing, and ultimately they are designed for people who don't follow or go on medications. Most IBD patients need some sort of IBD medication to function as a normal human being. So if you are on an IBD medication, which I highly recommend, and that is between you and your doctor as to what medication you should be on, etc., etc. I am not qualified to give medical advice. However, when it comes to diet and nutrition, I am a registered dietitian. I am an expert in Crohn's and colitis nutrition. And here are the science-backed recommendations for changes you should make to your diet that are not or do not require you to follow a super strict diet program. Advice number one is to eat a low-fat diet. And now you could say that I'm giving you advice to follow some sort of diet, but the non-diet way of doing this is to make subtle changes in your eating habits to garner this low-fat diet. It's not necessarily low fat, but healthier fat, right? So limit saturated fat, limit your use of regular dairy butter, limit how much red meat that you eat. If you're having dairy products, choose the non-fat version instead of the full-fat version. So these are different ways. And then in your cooking, instead of using butter, use olive oil. When you're baking, use like a vegan butter spread instead of a dairy butter. So these are just some simple ways to follow a lower fat, lower saturated fat diet. What high saturated fat does to your body is, one, it's very irritating on an inflamed gut, especially the ileum. Two, it increases intestinal permeability. So that is the area of your intestines that help block your gut microbes from your immune cells. And the idea of what's happening here is that when you have IBD, those junctions of your intestines are loose, and that is allowing gut microbes to pass through and come interact with your immune cells, and that inflames those pro-inflammatory immunes, creating an immune response, and that is what is damaging your intestinal lining, and thus cascading and leading to all of the damaging effects of Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. And high fats diets also alter your microbiome in an unfavorable way. So by following a low-fat diet, you're helping your intestinal lining repair itself, you're helping your microbiome to be in a better state of, I want to say biosis, it's undysbiosis, non-dysbiosis. So it's one way to help. So low fat / healthier fat diet, low saturated fat diet. Step number two is to incorporate fiber in your diet. We are still hearing the message to eat a low fiber diet, and that is just not necessary. It's not necessary. It's not. It's just a matter of how you eat that fiber, how you're increasing that fiber. As my guinea pig is jumping on some lettuce behind. Obviously, that being something you're not going to do, is you're not going to be chomping on lettuce. So what you would do is take something like carrots, and you would, roast them with some onions and maybe a little bit of turmeric and some ginger and some garlic seasoning and some salt and pepper with olive oil, with those healthy fats in there. You're going to roast those up, you're going to take them out, put them in a stock pot, add in a little bit of veggie stock or chicken broth, boil them for a little bit, use an emulsion blender, blender, or you're going to pop them in your blender, cover it with a towel, not the lid, and blend it up until it is pureed. If you have a stricture, you're going to take one additional step, and you are going to strain that soup so that there is very minimal pulp, very minimal fiber, but it is still a little bit of fiber. You're going to have your phytonutrients as well, which also act similarly to how fiber does in your gut. Or making smoothies. So take some frozen banana, a regular, actually non-frozen banana, some frozen strawberries, and some yogurt, some plain non-fat Greek yogurt, a little bit of honey or maple syrup, in that blender. You're going to blend it up and drink that. So those are some very simple ways to alter the consistency of fibrous foods, and you're only going to eat one a day for a few days at a time before you add another one. You're going to very slowly, gradually increase your fiber intake. Very slowly. Some people do better with oat fiber, some people do better with plant fiber, some people do better with whole grains. So you could start making whole grain banana muffins and eat one of those a day. And I am not on the train of gluten-free. There is not enough science to back up going gluten-free unless you have celiac disease or another allergy to gluten. Most patients with IBD do go gluten-free and say they notice an improvement, but it ultimately could be other factors that are in your gluten products that are bothering your subsystem instead of the gluten itself. So try making homemade products, homemade muffins, homemade breads, those kinds of things, because one of my other tips is to not eat yeast, or eat very minimally eat yeast if you have ileal Crohn's disease. There is some evidence from the 90s and early 2000s that suggests that we could have a very significant yeast intolerance. A lot of us, I think it's up to 75%, have antibodies to yeast that is used in bread, beer, and nutritional yeast. So again, I would highly recommend that you back off on consuming yeast. My next tip would be to eat small, frequent meals. So you're not going to eat a big breakfast, a big lunch, a big dinner. You're going to eat 6 or 7 meals a day, and you're going to eat very small portions at a time. And this ultimately helps with symptom management, but it also reduces the pressure and the load going through your intestines, which could give them some time to heal. In addition to that, if you are able to, I would recommend implementing intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is where you don't eat for 14 to 16 hour windows at a time. Usually people do that overnight. They stop eating at like say 6 p.m. and then you start eating again at 10 a.m. So that includes coffee, that you can drink black coffee, but I wouldn't put anything in your coffee, or tea, anything like that. So you're just 0 calories for 14 to 16 hours a day. The 16-hour window, that's kind of like the max where you're going to get benefits, so it's no need to go longer than that. And then 14 hours is the minimum where you're going to start to see those benefits. What this does is this will help kickstart your autophagy system. One of the issues that people with Crohn's have is that the cells in our intestines that help to moderate our microbial composition, the microbiome composition, are defective, whether that's an environmental trigger or genetic trigger. It could be a combination of both, but the cell that clears out the microbiome, those cells are defective, and autophagy helps to stimulate them. It gives them a little bit of boost, because that's essentially what they're meant to be doing, is autophagy. It's an autophagy gene that we have a defect in, most likely, especially again if you have ileal Crohn's disease. So what you should do is doing this intermittent fasting at least 4 to 6 days a week, if not every day, will help with that autophagy process and help clean up your microbiome. So those are just a few kind of non-diet approaches that you can fit into your lifestyle, make adjustments. And the way that this is ultimately better than following a diet is it's not super restrictive. You can still pretty much eat whatever you want, you know, with a few tweaks here and there. You know, if you want steak, fine, have that steak, but don't eat it again for a couple days, you know, for like 6 days, and once a week you can have that steak. It's just not as restrictive. It doesn't fuel the eating disorders, and it just gives you more leeway, so that on a holiday you can go hang out with your family, you can do what you want to do without worrying so much about it. And when you, for most of the time, are eating in this way, it helps you to feel better so that you can enjoy those holidays with your family and eating what they're eating and not have to worry about it causing you severe pain and discomfort. There's one more tip, the emulsifiers. So ideally you're going to avoid all processed food, but I know that this is not, it's not practical for most people to avoid processed food. The biggest problems with processed foods, 3 things. 1, they're designed to make you eat a lot, and eating a lot is not good for people with IBD. 2, they have a lot of additives. 3, they're usually high in fat. So we talked about the high fat thing, eating small, frequent meals that are satisfying. And then the 3rd thing is the emulsifiers. So there are 2 emulsifiers, polysorbate, 60, 80, I've seen both in food, and carboxymethylcellulose, CMC. Those are highly scientifically studied to wreak havoc on your intestinal barrier and on your microbiome, and they have been shown to cause colitis in mice. Even the initial studies that allowed polysorbate to come into the food system said that it caused colitis in mice. And they still passed. They still passed it into allowance into food. So double checking. I find this a lot in frostings, snack cakes, prepackaged donuts, things like that. So again, making these things yourself, you can still have frosting. You can make regular butter frosting from home with powdered sugar and vanilla and a little bit of salt. Whip that up and put that on your baked goods rather than buying Betty Crocker. Those small changes, because I know when you look at these diets, you're not allowed to have sugar, or you're not allowed to have butter, or you're not allowed to have powdered sugar. So you're making like some kind of coconut milk whipped topping with honey, and you're putting that on your cake. I'm sorry, but it's not the same. It's not the same. I am a foodie at heart. I am a junk food foodie. I love my food, and making things with almond flour just doesn't work for me. And so that's why I really subscribe to the fact that we only need to make few tweaks to improve our health, and it'll allow us to focus on our overall health as well, because you can look at these diets. I mean, you look at keto or paleo or the SCD diet that allow, bacon and red meat and all of these things. And if you're somebody who can't tolerate fruits and vegetables, and more than half of your food can't be fruits and vegetables because your digestive system is in such a state that you can't tolerate it, then what are you going to be eating? You're going to be eating chicken, you're going to be eating maybe some bacon, you're going to be eating all butter, ghee, which is still saturated fat. And what justice are you doing to your heart when we're at increased heart health risk? So it's really important that we're looking at the whole picture here, and you're able to sustain whatever eating changes that you're making, right? So that's why things like making it from scratch with regular whole ingredients, using flour, butter, sugar, they are single ingredient foods, and they are real things, and then moderating how much of them that you eat. So those are just a few tips, tricks that I have to follow a non-diet approach to help with your Crohn's disease nutritionally. You help improve, help with symptoms, those kinds of things. Be sure to like this video if it gave you any help, any support. Subscribe if you are new, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.